Hello, and welcome to Kier Here, a podcast where I interview weirdo artists, writers, and makers about what they do. I'm your host, Kier Adrian Gray. You can sign up for my newsletter to receive new episodes and other strange goodies straight to your inbox at kier.substack.com. That's KIER.substack.com. Our guest for today's episode is Tara McGowan-Ross. She is an urban Mi'kmaq multidisciplinary artist. She is the host of Drawn and Quarterly's Indigenous Literature's Book Club and a critic of independent and experimental theater for Broadway World. Her poetry has been published in Best Canadian Poetry and the collections Girth and Scorpion Season. Her debut book-length collection of nonfiction, Nothing Will Be Different, was published in 2021 by Dundurn Press. Welcome to the show, Tara.
Thanks for having me, Kier.
One thing that makes your book completely unique is that it has a soundtrack. Each chapter is named after a song, and I was listening to them as I went through, and there was this unexpected effect where the music made it so much easier for me to visualize the scenes as they unfolded. How did this idea to incorporate music into your memoir arise?
That's a great question. Yeah, it started off actually as I think probably kind of a crutch, like a creative crutch, like I was I was listening to music to get like revved up and psyched to like write whatever I was writing. And I was sort of lapsing in and out of various songs, and early drafts of each of the essays did have like song lyrics in them. And then over time those would get edited out, and there was a different version of the collection that had a different take on the titles. Like the titles instead had these like super academic sounding like essay titles basically. But it just seemed a bit snootier and like less like it just seemed a lot less like approachable. And there's a thread that goes through it that made me want to like bring the song titles back as like, which were really just supposed to be working titles when I first started writing it. Where like throughout my life, I've like one of the biggest ways that I feel like I like establish intimacy with people is like trading music back and forth. So like there's a few times in the book where like I'm either sitting next to somebody with like a laptop open and we're showing each other songs on YouTube, or like we're trading playlists back and forth, or like burning each other mix CDs or whatever. And like for me that's like I'm getting a peek into their brain, I'm getting a peek into their heart, like, and it's like that's like real intimacy. So I wanted to have that dynamic play out in the book as well.
That's neat. There's like the intimacy of like making a mixtape or a playlist for someone. And yeah, it's interesting that it was originally just for the rough draft, but I'm glad it made it into the final version. I was wondering if you could do a reading for us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was reading over some of your podcast, some of your Substack, which is really great. I think the content's really good. And I was relating with a lot of it, thinking about the sort of transition out of like really intense social justice stuff. And so I picked this one, which I think like I should probably say, like preface it comes with a content warning for like an intense moment of sexual trauma that is like not actually like sexual violence. So but one that I had to like think about a lot. So this is from The King of Carrot Flowers Part 1 by Neutral Milk Hotel. I had been so convinced that Tim was a rest stop. I was young, sexy, brilliant. I would have a long and exciting life, full of many lovers. I had been reticent to be really vulnerable with him, even as he was uniquely vulnerable with me. He had been my safety bet, my consolation prize. I was the goddess and he was my priest. This is what I told myself silently as I said I wanted to marry him. This is what I told myself while I gave my entire body to him and I saw the incredible genius things he could do with it. Meanwhile, he had been growing up. The poverty of independence had shaved off his extra pounds. Odd jobs in manual labor had stacked muscle onto him, cut his jaw like a plank of oak. Out of stress, anxiety, a deep sense of sadness, I never really respected him enough to try to understand. He had taken up smoking, and despite my family's cancer history and the stern warnings from my father, I still think smoking is hot. He got a better haircut and thrifted some pants that fit. One day after he left me, before we had sex on the living room floor, I was stunned to see that he was beautiful, fit, rugged, fashionable, talented, and completely done with my shit.
Oh,
After thanks, sorry, you want me to
sorry,
keep
keep
okay,
going.
cool, thank you. After we started kissing, but before we had sex, Tim tried to do the right thing. We were broken up and we were still roommates, and this was a bad idea. I thought for a minute. We're friends, I ventured. We do fun things together, right? He looked at me, skeptical, ethical, but also 19, right? I just think this is like, a fun thing we could do together. I said, once again, pulling up my cute teenage girl drag voice, syrupy and valley girl and innocent and stupid, just as friends. This was, of course, a con. I could feel our love between us, this unbreakable bond. It had been there the whole time we were broken up, but I'd been so pissed off, I'd been ignoring it. The dumping had been a blip, after all. I was going to annoy all of our roommates when we announced we had gotten back together, but it would be in an eye-rolling, smiley way before they handed us a beer and clapped us in the back and said, "Of course you did, you crazy kids. Tim and Tara forever." As soon as he felt it, he would understand that there was absolutely no version of his life that made sense without me in it. This was a crisis of faith. It happens to every man of God. After, sticky and exhausted and still bubbling like some kind of unstable landmass, I lay patiently with my face in my hands, gazing at him adoringly, and I waited for him to say it. I waited him to be like, "I'm so stupid. Of course I love you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." It never came. A few days later, we did it again, and then he got dressed without looking at me and said goodbye and went to band practice. He was treating me like a friend who he was also sleeping with, taking me at my word, like an idiot. Why couldn't he see the complex, silent, unexpressed desires that I actually had? I had to dial it up. I began a systematic campaign of emotional terrorism, usually while completely wasted, bending my life towards the singular goal of manipulating my ex back into loving me, and very importantly, without having a single adult conversation about it. I went in a crash diet, wore slinky clothes around the house. I couldn't have one interaction with him without dropping some thinly veiled attempt to make him feel bad. It got very, very weird. One night, I went out on a date with a customer from the cafe. The guy was my type, smart, friendly, funny, not, handsome enough to be a real emotional threat. A Tim type, a safe guy. Me and my customer crush had a one-night stand that I would first identify as extraordinarily bad sex, later identify as sexual assault, and then even later identify as a well-meaning but clueless man who was trying and failing to have safe and consensual sex with a teenage girl who had only ever had penetrative sex with one person and could not communicate about her needs or desires to save her life. I left his apartment the next morning at the crack of dawn after failing to sleep, bleeding and wondering where it all went wrong. I crawled into bed with Tim. I needed to come home now. I really needed all of this to be over. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed, so I just put his hands on me. He was into it until he saw the blood. He was disgusted and I was mute with shame. I didn't tell him what happened. It wouldn't have changed anything anyway. I went to my room, curled up into a ball on my bed, and I let myself cry because I knew it was over. I was sure then that he would never touch me again. Finally, I was right about something. I'll finish then.
Thank you. That excerpt gets to the heart of what I think is so powerful about this memoir. And there were these places where I was cringing in recognition, because before learning communication skills and working on being able to communicate about emotions and even understand them, manipulation is a tool that I think a lot of young people use. And I was wondering what it felt like to look back on those moments as an adult and then write about them for public consumption.
Yeah, like I think it's really interesting actually. The process is crazy because it's like um it makes me think a lot. Writing memoir makes me think a lot about what constitutes a lie, because like you can't just put everything, all of the facts into the, into the book. You can't just put like everything that happened exactly as it happened, like, time stamped exactly, because it would be really boring, and it would be like 4 million pages long, and it just like no one would want to read it. There'd be no story there. Like creative nonfiction is like taking your life, and that's like the raw material, and then you like make something out of it. You like carve stuff away, and you like mold thing, and you don't like change the facts of the matter, but you do like explode things and like frame things and like turn people who like are human beings into characters, which like, and you have to for the story. And like, um, so, and I had to think a lot about like what kind of protagonist I wanted to be, like it was like writing a story about myself. So I'm like, am I a hero? Am I a villain? Like, like, am I the, like, like, which of these things am I? And I think there's like throughout the book, there's a lot of me grappling with that about like, what, like, am I the hero or am I the villain of this situation? Um, and, uh, and yeah, I think what I think is really interesting is like, you can sit down to write about like the worst thing that ever happened to you, like, like the time that people were the meanest to you ever, it seems like. And then like, but like if you actually start reflecting on it with like a bit of like distance and perspective, like, and you're trying to tell a full complete story that is like compelling, where all the characters are fully realized human beings, like what I found was that like just the story was a lot more complicated than even like I thought it was, like when I sat down to write it. um so that's a lot of very unorganized thoughts in response to that, but yeah, it's very illuminating, trying to sum up your own
No kidding. Yeah,
life.
because you're right. Like there are so many like creative decisions that have to be made. I like how you said that real human beings have to become characters. Um, that that brings me to another thing, which is kind of making meaning out of our hardships and difficulties. And one thing that I see in your book is that like your book shows how this is a double-edged sword. You reach a point where you realize you have a need to put down some of these stories, that they're weighing on you, that they're a burden. And I was wondering whether it was a slow process to put those down, or was there an epiphany or a suddenness to kind of stepping out of feeling defined by these horrible things that had happened?
Yeah, I think it's probably I I think it's kind of both, because I think it's sort of this like yeah, to sort of define what's actually going on. There's sort of like the the section of the story is talking about this like a moment of like really intense emotional breakdown, where I'm realizing that I I'm I'm thinking about the narrative of my life, and I'm thinking like maybe it's actually not serving me to be constantly like hashing and rehashing these same things, which are like, like very genuine, real traumas, and like, like intense things that actually did happen. But like, maybe it's actually not serving me to be like constantly rehashing them and like living them in the present. And I think that that kind of decision can happen and be like extremely liberating in the moment. But then it's the kind of thing where like I think in like most things in life, like it's all a becoming, like it's all like life is just a bunch of separate becomings. So like there will be more times in the future where like that story about my life gets like recontextualized, and like more things get added to it, and I like think about it in a different way. And I have to still remember the process of like picking it up for a second and like looking at it and being like, oh, interesting, and then putting it back down again, like, and like trying not to like get super wrapped up in my own stories again. If that makes sense. So like I'm thinking like specifically about like, turning trauma into a narrative, and the process of integrating trauma as opposed to just like living in a perpetual state of like reliving trauma basically. um and like what happens is like in a moment of rupture, when like trigger when like trauma memories are like re-triggered or something, sometimes you like have to like go down back into something you've put away again, to be like, oh, interesting, that's like a new piece that I like didn't know was there, and like I'm thinking about it in a new way. But I'm trying to think about it in this very like Buddhist kind of way of just being like thinking and like processing as a tool, and like tools are great and like you need them, but like you don't need them all the time. You don't need all the same tools all the time. Like sometimes then like my processing and thinking about my trauma is like a hammer, and sometimes you need a screwdriver and something else, like, so it's like, and I got to put it back down every once in a while. So yeah.
Mhm. It's almost like it being the right. Yeah, actually, the tool metaphor is really interesting because it's there and it belongs to you, but you don't have to carry it everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I like that. Um, One of the most striking threads through this book is the story of you navigating the death of your mother when you were 9 years old. And when you heard it would take a miracle to keep her alive, it sounds like you took that as a personal challenge and
Mm.
prayed as hard as you could to try and make that miracle happen. And I had my own experience of magical thinking intertwining with grief, and blaming myself when that was in no way possible. And I was wondering, like, do you think there's a better way for us to talk about death with children, or is the topic just so big and all consuming that there isn't really a right way to go about it?
That's such a great question. Because yeah, I think what I'm still interested in as a concept is this idea that um and like a bit of it is in the book too, that like sometimes like crazy miraculous things like do happen, and like people do like survive these, like, like there's spontaneous remissions, and like people like just come through with like these like surgeries where there's like a tiny little chance that they were going to survive, and like the experimental drug works, and like whatever, like, and that like that does happen sometimes, but it's so random. Like it's just so random. It's so random that it almost seems not random. It's like one of those things where a friend of mine, like, well, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine works in and like worked for a while in an oncology ward. And she said that like crazy things would happen. Like just like every once in a while, every once in a long while, a crazy thing, someone would just get better. Like every once in a while, someone who did not seem like they were going to get better would get better. But it never seemed to be the people whose whole prayer group came and prayed in a circle around them. It was like the homeless guy who's like been hooked on fentanyl for like 2 years, like it's like that's the guy who like just he didn't expect to like live to 40, let alone like live to 40 and then like get like colon cancer that was like terminal, and then live to 40, get colon cancer that was terminal, and then survive. Like it's just like a crazy series of events. um but like that guy will walk out of there, but like, and like people who are trying everything won't. And like I definitely do think that there's like there's this really good-hearted, like there's a sinister underbelly to this really good-hearted way of explaining a lot of these like big questions to kids, which like the ones that I think really like did, I think, genuine damage to me when I was a kid, was these like everything happens for a reason, and like, like, and like this is all part of a plan, and like that like if you pray hard enough and you like, like good things will happen to you. And I'm just like, okay, so like where does that leave me, like where does that like leave my family, like, like if bad things only happen because you like aren't good enough, and like good things happen when you do all the right things, and there's a plan that involves like suffering at this level, then like what the heck, why am I not God's favorite, so like, and I think that can really mess people up. And I think it is the logical conclusion of a lot of that. Like I really felt God with me, like when I came through this thing, and it's like, and the way that like, God was not with all those people who did not come through the difficult thing, and like, so I really felt like I found a lot of there were people who were explaining a lot of these things to me in a way that I think did help. And those are the things that I like clung to, which is like a lot of it is really just, it's really random. It's like, it's really random and it's really crazy. And like life, whoa, like we're on a crazy rock and it's spinning through a galaxy. And like the fact that life exists at all is like really random and intense. And like everyone gets a life, and some people's lives are a few minutes long, and some of them are 100 years long, and some of them are really happy, and some of them are really hard, and like it's just kind of random, but like we all can be here for each other and like look out for each other, and like that's the thing that like makes life good, like not whether or not we live to be 100 years old and never get sick or whatever. It's actually just like how well we treat each other, and like how well we can look out for each other, and like bad things are still going to happen to people even if they do everything right. And like that was the thing that actually made me feel better, I think, and like made me feel like, because I think everything else has this like moral weight to it that like I think informed a lot of negative thinking that I then had to do a lot of work to unravel for a long time.
Absolutely. Yeah, the idea that there's some like moral rationale between like who lives and who dies it's shocking. And
Right.
I think it can absolutely lead to this like, well, then how do I be good? Like how do I do that? And if everything bad is evidence of being bad, like, I mean, I guess I'm saying I can see why you ended up going and getting yourself a philosophy degree,
Right.
because that's that's absolutely a lot to work through. And the idea that like the randomness, the chaos, that actually there's something comforting there, that we all we can do is sort of try our best, treat people as well as we can. And it almost feels like in the memoir, it's like, yeah, you're navigating like the chaos of the world and trying to see if there are things, like solid things to hold on to that can provide a bit of an anchor in that. Um, this is a bit of a meta question, but having written some zines and spoken about certain things like mental health personally, I have been asked some pretty invasive questions. And I was wondering, like, since publishing your memoir, have you gotten the impression that some strangers sort of feel this one-way closeness, or that they kind of open up to you in a surprising way, or feel entitled to certain information?
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know if I kind of always have felt, I feel like I just have one of those faces, like I feel like I just have one of those like vibes. Like, so I've kind of always felt like there are people like, if someone wants to open up to somebody and they meet me, I'm the person they're gonna want to open up to. I really like people. I'm like a very like gregarious, warm person. I'm a hardcore introvert. So like I get like overwhelmed really easily, but I also like when I am out and about and meeting people, I'm really happy to be doing it. I just like my social battery is like taking, 2 hits per second. It's just like in the process of draining all the time. But so I kind of already felt that way a little bit. So, but I do think there's like a bit of an uptick slightly, but like I don't know if it really bugs me that much. And it hasn't, like, I know that there are a lot of people who I know who like write specifically about like sex and sexuality a lot, who say that they like that's like a thing that they suddenly people just felt like they're like, first of all, we're besties, and second of all, I'm going to like start opening up a lot about this thing. And I haven't felt that quite so much. I do think that like often when I meet people who've read the book, and then we do like um hit it off, there was like a level of like there's a level of intimacy and like assumed like when people read something that does something really a lot for them, like there's like, I think there's like an assumption that continuing to like talk to me will continue to talk to the writer of whatever they read that like did that for them, will give them more of that same thing. And sometimes I'm just like, I wrote 7 drafts of that book, like it was like, it's a very like carefully hewn me. Most of the time I'm just kind of like, blah, blah, like I'm just sort of like saying whatever. And like, I'm not my best self most of the time. And like, that book is like very much my best self, like, like 7 versions of my best self, like carefully like edited down or whatever. So I think that's sometimes like maybe a misunderstanding. Um, I do think that maybe there's like a little bit of like people assume that people who are close to me assume that they like assume that we've caught up or whatever. And then I'm like, no, I don't know anything about know anything about your life. Like, like I actually have no idea what's happening with you. Um, and then also similarly, sometimes I do the thing where people are like, so what have you been up to for the last little bit? And I'm like, oh, didn't you read the book? Like I published a book. I don't really want to explain it again. So if you could just do the reading before you come to class, that'd be great. So that's definitely a weird social dynamic, all of those ones.
Yeah, it's almost like there can be this like imbalance, right? Where it's like, well, the other person hasn't written a book that you have been able to read. But I had a funny experience like this week where I wrote this newsletter about my rabbits, and then a friend of mine asked a question that was clearly answered in the newsletter, and I was like, I felt miffed, which is funny because the idea that like everyone should catch up on my newsletter before talking to me personally is like just hilarious and completely unrealistic.
Totally. No, I do this like really ridiculous thing sometimes where like people will like this is like a and I know that I'm being ridiculous when this is happening, but like basically like if I come if I meet somebody, especially when I talk to somebody in my personal life who holds a belief that I used to believe but have since rejected, and then have like written about how I rejected that belief, I'm just like, no, we all decided, like we all like we all like came to the conclusion that we're over that actually now. and like and I'm just like, didn't you read the post? Like we all are past. But I'm like, no, people are allowed to disagree. It's fine. It's just like, but I'm always just like, did you read the post? Because I made a really good point.
It's so easy to do that. Yeah, like personal realizations just sort of like emanate off of us, and the people around us should just kind of catch them by
Yeah.
osmosis.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you speak of self-delusion in your book, and uh, you speak about it as an approach that has served you well in certain ways. And this got me thinking about how we kind of ask artists both to believe in themselves and believe in their work, but to also kind of do that privately, because I think people can be ridiculed or considered unserious if they're too public or too earnest about what they're doing, and that they take pride in it and that they believe in it. I guess this pressure to perform humility feels like a piece that I've seen. So as someone who has always known how awesome you are, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's actually such a funny point. I think that's like I see this all the time. Yeah, I think I see this like a lot where like even from like other artists talking about how like cringe it is when like artists will like advertise their work, and I'm like, dude, what are we supposed to do? Like I'm like, actually, like what, like how hard this is, like what are we supposed to do? And like and I do think that there's this like it's this double bind so much too, because like also like grind culture is like so intense at this point, like when like for artists, and like there's just this like constant demand for output, and also it has to be at this really high level of quality, and also you have to be really like humble about it, but also you better be getting like the subscriptions like really fast, like or else like you're not gonna be able to pay rent. And like so it's like it's so many weird pressures, and I think it becomes like even more intense like I like like I do think it is more intense for like people who like deal with maybe with like I think it's more intense for women, and like I think it's more intense for like queers a lot of the time, where it's just like people who have just been like historically marginalized by patriarchy or whatever. It's just like this like people I've noticed really hate confident women and like really hate like women who like want any kind of attention or like think that they're dope. And like it just goes against a lot of like ideas of like traditional ideas of femininity, which I think are ridiculous because those are all made up anyway. But like and I'm like lots of men are super humble, and like lots of women are super confident, but I think that it's like I think that a lot of the self-delusion piece is also like I think I literally just have to tell myself things about like myself and about like my everyday life that are just straight up not true. or I will be so bored that like I will like not want to do anything, you know, like, and I think it's like I can't help but feel like maybe, you know, decorating is a kind of self-delusion, like makeup's a kind of self-delusion, like, you know, like fashion's a kind of self-delusion. Like I'm just like constantly like decorate, like setting up, tinkering up this like little world I want to live in, and like writing my little stories in my head about what's actually happening in my like social life or whatever, so that I'm going to be like excited about going forward. And it's like I kind of think about it as sort of the opposite of, it's the like the mirror inverse of anxiety. Like I kind of feel like if I like sometimes I find when I'm like trying to be more objective about things, what's actually happening is I'm just like being a lot meaner to myself, like, you know, and like believing things that are just like less fun and like less cool and like whatever about like myself and about the world around me. And I'm like, what about that like actually makes it more objective? It makes me think about like that like ContraPoints bit where like she's talking about like Natalie Wynn, who has a YouTube channel called ContraPoints, has this whole bit where she talks about masochistic epistemology, about how like there's this like weird cognitive distortion about like just actually thinking that like if it hurts more and if it's uglier and if it's like more bland, then it's more true and it's just like better or whatever. And like I have to kind of, I do feel like it might be a self-delusion. I do feel like I kind of have to like reject that. But it was like, yeah, I was like, at one point I was a teen and my aunt told me like, I was auditioning for a play that I wanted to get into and I was nervous about it. But my aunt was like, why, you don't have to be nervous. And she's just like, you just like, who's better than you? You know, and it was like, she's like, sometimes it's just like, that's just like how she pumps herself up. She's just like, when she has to go do something that's like, she's nervous for, she's just like, who's better than me? And then she's like, can't, she's like, and I usually can't think of anybody. Like, it's like, who's better than me for this thing? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if there actually is anyone. So like, and like, what makes them better? You know, you know, and it's just, it's like, I think that when we get into these like anxiety spirals or these like self-loathing spirals, it's the exact same thought mechanism. It's just going in a different direction. And I do think there are like certain like social and cultural like pressures on people to like think mean things about themselves, and like that's like somehow better and like going to make you a better person than thinking like nice things about yourself. But like if you just can like steer it in the direction of the nice things, like you can really pump yourself up in a really efficient way. And like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a long time trying to see if beating myself up about everything would result in art, and it did not.
Mm. Yeah, it's a really inefficient motivator. Shame is like a really like, it doesn't really work for you. It can work apparently, like there are studies on this like psychologically or whatever, and like it works fine for a really short period of time, and then
Mm,
it tends to like burn out, and then the like usually the effects of like shame are actually like the opposite of what you actually want, like holistically, you know, like because it's like
yeah,
it feels bad to hate yourself.
it does. It does. And it like is just as likely to be exaggerated as like a helpful self-delusion is.
Totally.
Um, this brings me to how you grapple in this book with the need for your pain to be extraordinary in a sense, right? Like
Mhm.
more and bigger. And um, I remember when I was in my early 20s, probably my late 20s too, it felt like my pain was what was unique and interesting about me to a large
Oh
extent.
yeah.
And I was wondering, I guess, like, do you have thoughts on where this tendency comes from? And I'm curious, like, um, I wonder if we've always sort of been like this and there's like a contemporary, or is there something about this moment we're in, like the beginning of the digital era, that might have, I don't know, sort of encouraged like performances around being in pain?
That's such a, yeah, I think that's like, I think that a lot of those, I think all of those play some part in it. I think that there is a, because I was just thinking about the same question again recently, because I've been having like some weird flare-ups of some like physical health stuff again. And like, oh no, I'm so sick, you know, and like, which is like, I mean, I am sick. Like I am just straight up like have been feeling sick. But then I spent 2 days doing like really intensive, awesome, extensive outdoor like exercise and getting like a lot of fresh air and like moving my body a lot in like low impact, but like long duration, like whatever, getting like 20,000 steps and like swimming in lakes and stuff like that. And I felt fantastic. Like, I just felt like most of the problems went away in like 2 or 3 days of that. And like, I have consistently had this same thought process over and over, where I'm just like, exercise won't solve my problem. And then I exercise and I'm like, oh no, it does solve the problem. Cause I just want, I actually genuinely want the problem to be bigger than like, I just need to exercise more. Like, because it's not like I just sit around all day. Like, I do get like an hour of like low impact exercise a day at least. Like, I would go for walks or whatever, but like I probably need to be doing more like 3 or whatever, like closer to that. Cause like I'm a writer. So like mostly I'm inside like a little gremlin and I need to like counterbalance it by doing something else. So like, and it just, but so like sometimes the way that I think about it, which is very narrative and not scientific at all, is that I almost feel like my misery has a kind of agency. Like, it's almost like being possessed by a demon, like it's just like, and that like I think about how like rabies, when animals have rabies, the reason why they're afraid of water apparently is because like rabies gets diluted in water. So they're like, and there's this weird thing, like this is theory about rabies, which is that basically if like a dog's foaming at the mouth because it has rabies, it's going to be afraid of water because it's less likely to transmit the virus if it has water in its mouth. So it's like the virus actually has a kind of will. It's like, it's exerting a kind of will over the animal. And like sometimes I think about like my misery that way, and like just like that it has a kind of will and it's trying to self-perpetuate itself. And like, so and I think of it that way. It's a sort of helpful self-delusion. I think about it that way because it's easier to fight it. It's easier to just be like, no, like, like I've got to like, it's a bad guy and I need to fight with it, like, and like I need to like outsmart it and outwit it. And like it, like the thing that will make it better is exercise. And that's why it's telling me that like exercise is impossible. And your problems are so much bigger than that. Like your problems are so much more intense than you just need to eat less sugar. Like, like, and like, well, maybe, and maybe that's not the only thing, but like, in addition to like taking your medication and like, like, and doing your therapy, you also need to like eat well and like go outside and like exercise and stuff. So like, so I think that like sometimes I wonder if that's like a part of it. It's just like that maybe like a function of depression is the urge to self-perpetuate it itself. And like, because like, yeah, like a lot of my like depressive intrusive thoughts are literally things about how like other people are bad and you shouldn't hang out with them, even though like socializing helps. Like, socializing is like one of the things that helps. And like connection is fake, and like, like love isn't real, and like, all these like other things that I'm just like, connection and love and like community are like also things that help when I'm like miserable. But I do think that like that there's a part of the like incredibly part of the like incredibly atomized, I think, like nature of the late capitalist realism that we're like currently living in, is this thing of just like we're all so cut off from each other. Like we're more connected in this like very like artificial way, but also like more like actually like atomized and cut off than we've ever been throughout like much of human history. And like that is because that's like an effective strategy to like extract profit from people, like it's just like that's like how that all functions. And like and I think that like constantly navel gazing, this like consistent and constant navel gazing, also like ends up being a like effective strategy in order to like stop us from doing things like unionizing our workplaces and like, like actually like combating climate change effectively or whatever. If it's just like, no, you feel bad because you haven't figured out what's like personally specifically wrong with you yet. And so like, if you just can do that, then everything will get better. And it's just like maybe that's part of it, but also maybe like if I like talk to my neighbors more and like, like had more effective, like maybe a lot of the other stuff would sort of fall away. So I do think a lot of it is just like a byproduct of like capitalism. And I don't think it's necessarily just like millennials being like self-important dweebs or whatever, because there's something about us that makes us all self-important dweebs. Maybe we're a little bit self-important dweebs, but mostly we're self-important dweebs because of the situation that we're in, and it's not entirely our fault. And there's a way out,
Mm-hmm. I like chef's kiss. That was that was really good. Yeah. I remember a friend of mine, we were talking about like having just like this super important like outsider identity, and I thought my friend summed it up so well when they said when they were younger, it was practically like, well, other people need to drink water to stay alive, but like I'm
Right.
queer. Like,
It's queer to be dehydrated.
yeah. And all these things like yeah the way that depression like whispers in our ear that like yeah nothing will work, not exercise, not sleeping properly, not seeing friends, and like I finally pretty recently stopped fighting exercising so hard, and yeah, it turns out that what a lot of experts are saying there's something to it.
It's shocking. Like it's shocking, and it makes me feel so stupid because I literally was just like, that's not going to help for like so long. And then you do yoga for like 2 weeks straight and you're like, oh, it does help. Oh my God. Like, like in meditating is the other one that I was just like, it's not going to do what sitting on the floor for 10 minutes. No way. That's not going to. And then I sit on the floor for 10 minutes for like 3 days in a row. And by the third day, I'm like, my brain has knit itself back together. Like I actually just needed to sit down and shut up for 10 minutes a day. Like the incredible life altering power of just sitting down and shutting up for 10 minutes.
I mean, I wish that I had time for 10 minutes of silence a day. I'm way too busy scrolling on the internet. But
Yes.
yeah, I've heard that it does great things.
Yeah, what are you talking about? I have to like sit cramping my neck up for 21 hours a day.
Exactly.
Really important.
Super busy schedule. The chapter in your book that was like the most hilarious and also completely horrifying was the tree planting chapter.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. And what I found almost more horrifying is that you went back.
Yeah, I went back like 4 times or something crazy like that. Like I just like kept on going back for like 5 years.
Wow. Okay. Tell me, like, why was it financial, or was there something else that you got out of your time there?
I think that it was like, well, okay, part of it was like the pursuit of finances, although I did like by the end of my career, I was just like, I am like the most highly experienced, solid like mid baller that I know, like low mid baller that I know. Like I'd like, and this is tree planting terminology. If you're not a tree planter, there's like low ballers, there's mid ballers, there's high ballers, and high ballers make a lot of money. Mid ballers are like, and that's probably where I was most of the time. Like I could always plant 1,500 trees no matter like what was going on. Like, like it's just, it could be a sleet storm. I will plant you 1,500 trees. Best land you've ever seen in your life. I will plant you 1,500 trees and I'll have a really good day. Like, like the hardest, rockiest, crappiest land ever, probably plant like 700 trees, but like, but I'll also like, I won't complain about it. And so this was just kind of like the end of my planting career. This is what it looked like. So like, and I just sort of never got, I got up to the point where I was like planting 2,000 trees a day. And then it was just so hard. I like didn't want to stay up there. So I just like brought it back down to like where it was like maintainable. And then I just kind of stayed there. But I always had big dreams about like this year, I'm going to go back and I'm going to be a super high baller and be planting like 3,000 trees every single day. And I'm going to make, $400 every day. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to be able to buy a golden horse and I'll ride it every day to the fair. And like, this was like kind of the thought process that I was having. And like, when I was like in my 20s and I was super income insecure and I was in university and I was just super broke, that was always the dream. But I think that like really what got me was like, you're out in the middle of nowhere, no one can talk to you. It's like it's quiet as heck. Like it's just like the very fast-paced lifestyle of like normal like city life is just like not a thing. And like and even like whatever, I've lived in the country too, and like there's still internet out there, like I'm still constantly getting like pings of messages or whatever, and that just like does not happen in the bush. You do not have Wi-Fi, you do not have like cell phone access. It's like you cannot be seen. One second, just a quick cough. So and then you're out it's not like you're not doing a lot of stuff, because you are, but you're doing a lot of like you're waking up very early and you're kind of doing the same thing every day. So there's something that I found very like mentally relaxing about like that, when people talk about how like at least prisons 3 hots and a cot or whatever, I was like, at least I don't have to pay rent. I don't have to I don't have to pay for groceries. I like don't have to like be constantly worrying about like how am I going to pay for the next thing, because I'm like, I live in a wet bag in the woods and I like there's someone else makes my food and I have a job, and like that's often better than my life was actually like set up in my 20s when I was just a complete chaos dragon and like nothing was ever set up properly. So like but the downside is that it's the most horrifyingly difficult manual labor you can imagine. So like it's weird that that was where I went to kind of like chill out and like reset and like rest my mind, but like it was. And I think that part of it is also that exercise piece of just like even when it was like maddeningly difficult, it's like it feels good to walk for 10 hours a day. Like it just like hiking for 10 hours a day is like it's bad for your body, but it's also like good in another way too. Usually the first month and a half would be great, and the last 2 weeks I would just start falling apart because it was too much. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like it feels like, yeah, the internet and cell phone signals, like yeah, they've really engineered them quite well to be so compelling that being away from that is very attractive. And um, yeah, I'm not going to become a tree planter though. I couldn't do it. I couldn't
I
hack
wouldn't
it.
recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. It's like I do kind of feel like people in their late teens, early 20s, if you feel like doing it, anyone listening, doing it at least once, I think is like actually a really good idea. I really think it was like a huge coming of age thing for me. For anyone who doesn't know, tree planting is like it's an intense manual labor. It's piecework, so you get paid per tree, which means that you can make a lot of money, or you can make minimum wage by doing the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. And usually you're out in a bush camp, so it's like about 100 people, 3 hours from the closest town in the middle of nowhere in like any province in Canada, but like the biggest operations are in like Ontario and BC. BC pays better. Ontario is like easier land. So that's the general breakdown. And it's like in your reforesting clear cuts basically that like used to be that have been cut down to make toilet paper or whatever. And like I do think that it was like I think that like the personality change in me before I went the first time versus like when I came back, it was like night and day. Like I really feel like there was just it taught me how to work at all, like how to work hard, how to also like not take my own like pain so seriously. I think was also like really important. Like not take my own not take my own narratives about like how like I can't do it like so like quite so seriously. I just like didn't take myself as seriously after. And then also like nothing ever quite felt as hard, like, which is not to say that I don't still avoid hard things, like because I do, but at least I like know consciously that it's like, yeah, walking 15 minutes to go get like chips at the dep is like not hard. Like it's just like I don't want to do it, but it's not hard. Like planting 3,000 trees in a swamp is hard, but walking 45 minutes to get to my grandma's house is like not hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like it gave you a lot of perspective. And yeah, there's definitely like a romance to that a bit. Like I did cherry picking for a short bit, but yeah, it was there was something about just like the quietness of the camps and being up at dawn. And yeah, it was smelling like pesticides at the end was not the best part of it, but
Yeah. Yeah, you eat a lot of dirt.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about dirt like under calluses that like became a part of you at some point.
Totally. Yeah. You get the dirty hands and then your calluses grow over the dirt and it's called permadirt and it like falls off like 3 months later when like your skin finally totally regenerates. And like, yeah, you could wash it until you'd have to hurt yourself to like get the actual dirt to come off. It got really intense. But yeah, I think that like the quietness of it. And then also just like, it's like, I do think that it's like it makes you understand like, oh yeah, I'm a primate, like it's like, and it's like in a way that's kind of nice, like not in a like I feel like not in a like a super like Joe Rogan like I'm just only going to eat like liver and like run around or whatever kind of way, but like but in more of a like I'm an animal and I have a relationship to land, like I have a relationship. And like also I do think that there's like a way in which like a lot of people who are tree planters talk about developing this of like it's like my job like as an animal to like take care of the planet, like that's like my like I am the kind of animal that like caretakes the planet, like, and like it feels really good to like caretake the planet and like whatever. And like tree plantings are really incomplete, imperfect like way to caretake, and like it's got a lot of problems, but like it's like, but it is better than not doing it at all. And like and it's a lot of, it's not an environmentalist job, but a lot of people come out of it like as environmentalists who like want to take care of the planet and stuff.
Yeah, I think when I was like 18, 19, I worked and volunteered with Greenpeace and went up to Fort McMurray. And like, I think that it's one thing to hear about something like a clear cut and, or even just see a picture. But when you're actually there, like there's just, it's unforgettable, like to just see what it looks like when we just strip the land away. And yeah, and feeling like you have a small piece in repairing that. There's that, definitely there's some power there for sure.
Totally.
There was this dance in your book between motivation and desire. There are times where your actions contradict or obscure what you're trying to get out of a situation or a relationship. And it really allows us as the reader to be in on the confusion and the angst and the frustration that this causes. And one thing I'm grappling with as I age is like whether it's possible to close the gap between intention and action. Like, does self-awareness that they're far apart make it easier to bring them together, or are we just somewhat, I don't know, are we going to continue to kind of grapple with the disconnect or the distance between intention and action?
Wow, yeah, that's a really beautiful way of putting that. There's this like one, like it's funny because like I was writing about these things, just being like kind of like, isn't it silly how like, you know, you think someone's cute, but also you're like doing it, you know, like I think about this one scene in the book where I'm just like, there's a guy I really have a crush on who's like clearly trying to hook up with me, but I'm just like doing a slate of just the unsexiest things possible. And like, it's like, and it's just in my brain, I'm just kind of like, I am the most annoying person ever to hook up with. Like, welcome to my life. But like, but what I think is funny is that like, I actually had somebody who read the book brought up this, like, there's this one like psychology framework that I think is like really interesting. It's called like parts and like parts work about how like, and it's like this idea that like we've got like that people have to a varying degrees, like, you know, huge gigantic spectrum of like how disconnected these all are, is like basically like your personality is like literally subdivided to a certain extent, and like you've got like parts of you who want things and are like big adventurers and like want to like go out and find things and like have experiences or whatever, and there are parts of you that like really want to protect you from like anything bad ever happening ever. And then like, and I like, and so I think that a lot of the time that's the like the conversation that's going on, like, you know, is this like motivation and intention and like motivation in my actions is like what it feels like what I want, like, you know, like the part of me that wants things and is like driven forward, that like that's the part that's looking out for me, but it's actually the part of me that's trying to sabotage myself that's like looking out for me, because that's the part that's like no, like if we try things we might get really disappointed, so like we don't try like too hard and we like stay here in our like protect like nice comfortable little zone and like don't like extend outwards too far, because out there something might be disappointing or like frustrating or hurt or whatever. um and like these two parts are like often just like literally having a fist fight, like, you know, like just trying to like do things, because it's like, and like rationally I can tell as like, you know, a full adult who like you know, has all my faculties and is like, you know, relatively well therapized and like sober and well medicated, is like that I know that I'm just like, I'm like, come on, I feel like I'm kind of like dragging two kids, like I'm just like, come on, like, you know, like we're gotta do the thing. And like I understand that it's like we have to like extend out a little bit in order to like grow and like get and like, you know, have our lives be better or whatever. But it's like I'm constantly negotiating with like the parts of me that want expansion and like change, and the parts of me that don't want anything to change ever and want to keep everything really safe all the time. And like I think that's a really like productive and interesting framework, and like that particular framework in psychology is like all about like just literally just like negotiating with them more and just being like, how can we like compromise? How can we like, you know, try to like, and like compromise ends up being like literally thinking about them like they're different people and being like, how can we like get them to work with each other a bit more effectively? And like thinking about it like it's a meeting and we all got to get to a point of consensus so we can like all move forward together. And like, so that's something that's like, that I've been like experimenting with a little bit lately. And yeah, I think it does sound like it's like very productive and it does sound like it makes sense. I think that like it's one of those things where like in theory that's great, in practice it's still really hard. Like it's still like really hard to like be like I've also been thinking a lot about how often I think I fall into this thing where I'm like, I plan the perfect way to do things. Like I'm going to do things exactly this way. And I just like plan to do them. And then like, but like ultimately, like there is no like planning the perfect way to do things. And then like being the person who does this plan, there's just like moments and you make decisions, you know, like, and in those moments you just make decisions. And it's just about like, and your life is really who you are as a person and your whole life is really just like the sum total of all these decisions that you made. So it's like trying to actually think less and just like act more like in the moment and just like not worrying too much about what the right, you know, like not even really worrying that much about like what the right action is, but just also just being like what feels right here and like what like do I actually like, what do I actually want, let's like move towards that. That also like often like it helps just if just like thinking less and doing more.
Absolutely. Yeah. At some point I realized like every time I started a healthy habit, I was like, okay, I am literally going to do this every single day until I die. And then the first day that I didn't do it, I was like, well, everything is ruined. Like I can never do that again.
Done.
It's over. And yeah, it turns out that you could just start doing it again after you stop and as many times as necessary.
Totally.
So there's this phrase that I think will stick with me from your book, which is that bitch potential. um, yeah, I want to ask, like, I mean, I have mixed feelings about potential, right? Like the expectation of passing certain milestones at certain ages, or that life doesn't count unless certain things are achieved, or the idea that like potential can just be taken and lost by illness or something like that. I was wondering, now that you've published 2 collections of poetry, a memoir, and according to your email auto reply, are slamming out a novel draft, has your relationship to the word potential shifted?
So I think so. I think a little bit. I think that I maybe am like, I do feel like I think about potential and my frustrations with potential sort of exist on like, there's like potential on a macro level and then potential on a micro level. And like on a macro level, I almost feel a bit more chill about things. Like I do feel like I'm relatively good at like moving towards and like in a productive way, like long-term major projects. Like I think that's something that I'm better at doing. It's like the day to day that like really stresses me out. Like, you know, like it's just like it's when you wake up and you're just like you're like trying to manage like how do I answer all my emails and like clean my bathroom and like go get mustard and like, you know, like, and then also write these things that I have to write and like do all the other work that I have to do, like, you know, and like what order do I do them in and like blah, and like and then like that and like how do I stay motivated the whole time and like how do I like stay excited about them, and like I know that each of these things is like building towards that bigger thing, and like but like but I it's so hard to have that perspective shift, you know, like and then also like on a micro level, like often there's little things that like maybe don't even really in a they might not even actually contribute to the major thing, like whether or not my bathroom is super clean actually might not have anything to do with whether or not I can write a novel at all. Like actually there might be no connection. Like as long as the bathroom is usable, like, you know, like even remotely, it's like I can probably still write the novel. Like it doesn't have to be clean, but like I would like to, it would make me feel better. I would feel like my like overall like my cortisol levels would be lower if like I could also have like a clean and organized apartment while I'm also like doing these like big projects. And like and those things I really struggle with. Like I have a terrible time like housekeeping. I have an awful I wrote something about on my Substack about it, about how like I really struggle with stuff like that. I struggle with like, how do I feed myself in a reasonable way? How do I like keep up with all the messages from all the people that I love, you know, that I want to talk to, and like with like while also like having a even remotely productive day every day. And like those are the things that really really bug me. And like and I think that like that at that particular point of the memoir, I was like talking about how like if my like part of what bothers me on this like micro level is that I think a lot of those little things, there's so much moral weight to them a lot of the time. Like there's so much like, and there's so much like weird structural societal moral weight to like whether or not my like house is clean, whether or not like I am keeping in regular contact with like people who love me, you know, like and like want to talk to me and stuff like that. And like often that feels like a drain on my energy resources to like work towards these like big things that I want in my life. And then I feel even worse morally because I'm so selfish. All I care about is like writing a novel, and I don't, so I didn't call my grandma back or whatever, you know, like, and that like makes me feel like a bad person. And like, so, and then that constant negotiation in my head, I'm just like, I just don't want to I don't want to have to think about it. I want to at least be able to, because like I'm thinking about it so much that I can't clean my bathroom. Like I can't, and I can't write my grandma back, and I can't write my novel, and like, you know, and like, so I do think that like on a macro level, I feel good about potential, but I feel like that was never really my problem. I think on a micro level, I am still trying to figure out how to make the kinds of sacrifices that I think I need to make in order to like make space for the things that are actually important in my like day to day. And like I do think that it might just be a matter of like I don't actually have time for all those things. Like, you know, like I actually like don't, there just actually isn't time for all of those things, and something's got to give, and I got to figure out which are the things that have to give. Like, you know, like do I just have to shell out money to have somebody else come and clean my house? Like do I just have to like throw my phone in the river and be like, I'll call people back on Wednesday afternoons, and like, you know, you have to wait until Wednesday afternoon, and then I'm going to call everybody back on Wednesday afternoon, you know, like, am I going to have to just like, or am I just going to have to like let most of my close relationships shrivel away and be like, I just live in a tower and I'm a writer, and like you just have to live with that. Like maybe one day I'll write you into a novel, and that's how we'll hang out with each other, you know. So, and I do think that like right now I'm still on the level of sacrifice, and I don't know if that's the right way to do, but that's the only thing mathematically I think makes any sense at this point, because I keep on trying to like sit down and like schedule it out, and numbers aren't adding up. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
You know, I think I find that kind of reassuring, and I think a lot of people would, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, yeah, I could have a perfectly clean house and not have a podcast, you know,
Right.
or like there's yeah, this constant juggle. And yeah, I think I mean, I for one am really glad that you have found ways to fit this writing into your life, because I really, really enjoyed your memoir.
Aw, that's so kind of you, Kier. Yeah, it's neglecting other things.
A great excuse for never doing laundry again.
Yeah, totally.
That's why we really need our friends to read our newsletters, is because like that's it. Like
Yeah.
this.
I just threw my underwear out and bought new ones, guys. Like you need to like, you guys need to read it, please.
Well, Tara, I want to thank you so much for speaking with me today. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kira. This has really been very fun. Thank you. And I love all the work you're doing, and I'm so excited to keep following your work.
Oh, thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm on all relevant and irrelevant social media at Girth Girl, GIRTHGIRL. It's Girth, like my first book. I'm not a size queen. And then the other thing is taramcgowanross.substack.com. So it's just my full name. So it's taramcgowanross.substack.com is my newsletter. And then you can also find me at girthgirl.ca. That's my website. And that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Thanks again. This has been Kier Here, a podcast where I interview weirdo artists, writers, and makers about what they do. I'm your host, Kier Adrian Gray. You can sign up for my newsletter to receive new episodes and other strange goodies straight to your inbox at kier.substack.com. That's KIER.substack.com. Until next time.